My sister walked through my parents' front door like she was entering a stage, both arms extended, chin lifted, the kind of entrance that announces itself before a word is spoken. Behind her, her fiancé followed in a tailored charcoal blazer, the kind that costs more than my monthly student loan payment. He was tall, composed, the sort of handsome that photographs well and ages better. My sister turned to us with the smile she reserves for moments she's been rehearsing. "Everyone," she said, drawing it out. "This is Daniel." I was sitting at the far end of the dining table, still in the blue scrubs I'd worn for the last 31 hours. I hadn't had time to change. I'd driven straight from Mercy County Hospital to my parents' house with a granola bar and half a gas station coffee keeping me upright. My hospital ID badge was still clipped to my left pocket. My hair was in the same bun I'd pinned up at 5 in the morning the day before. My mother clasped her hands together. "Oh, he's even more handsome than your pictures." My father stood up to shake Daniel's hand like he was meeting a senator. My sister caught my eye from across the room, and the smile didn't change. It just sharpened slightly, the way a knife looks the same until light hits it at the right angle. "Daniel's a cardiothoracic surgeon," she announced, still looking at me. "Private practice. He was just featured in Modern Medicine last month." The cover, my mother repeated, like a call and response at church. Daniel smiled modestly and said something about it being overstated. He had the grace to seem uncomfortable with the attention, which I noted. I set down my fork and gave him a nod. "Congratulations. That's a hard specialty." My sister settled into her chair. "He trained at Johns Hopkins, did his fellowship at Cleveland Clinic." She paused just long enough to let that breathe. "Where did you do yours again?" She knew where I did mine. She had been at the graduation dinner, University of Washington, I said. "Right." She reached for her wine. "The county program." My father chuckled. Not at anything specific. Just a general rumble of amusement that filled the space she'd left open for it. My mother started passing the breadbasket, which in our family is the equivalent of changing the subject, except nobody actually changes the subject. Daniel was quiet for a moment, unfolding his napkin. I watched him from the corner of my eye. He had the hands of a surgeon still, deliberate, never moving without intention. He reached for his water glass and then paused, glancing at the table with the expression of someone who is deciding whether or not to speak. He decided not to, at least not yet. "She works at a county hospital," my sister continued, addressing Daniel as if I wasn't sitting 8 feet away. "The big one, downtown, level 1, trauma. You know how it is, mostly uninsured patients. A lot of volume. Not exactly cutting edge." She tilted her head at me with practiced sympathy. "It's meaningful work, I'm sure." "It is," I said. "Daniel's practice does valve replacements, bypasses, the really complex cases. He turned down 3 hospital directorships this year." She said it like she was reading from a resume she'd memorized. "Apparently, people come from other countries just to see him operate." My father nodded slowly. "That's real medicine right there." I looked at my plate. The roast chicken had gone slightly cold. I picked up my fork again and said nothing, which is something I have spent 31 years getting very good at. My sister was not finished. She rarely is. "I just think," she continued, pouring more wine with the confidence of someone who has been winning this argument in her head for years, "that there's a difference between working in a system and actually advancing it. Daniel's published 18 papers. He's changing how people think about cardiac repair. Meanwhile, and here, she gestured at me in a way that was somehow both casual and surgical, she's in the ER, stabilizing whoever comes through the ambulance bay." She smiled. "Which is fine. Someone has to do it." The table was quiet for a half second. Then my father said, "It's just different levels of impact, that's all." My mother said, "Let's not make this a competition." But she was smiling when she said it. I set my fork down very gently. I picked up my water. I drank it slowly and said nothing at all, because I have learned, through years of practice, that silence in a room like this is the only thing that belongs entirely to me. Daniel cleared his throat. He had been looking at me since my sister's last sentence. Not the way people look when they're being polite. The way they look when they're trying to place something. His eyes moved from my face down to my badge and back up, and then something in his expression shifted very slightly, like a gear turning over once before catching. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice was quieter than it had been. "What hospital did you say?" I looked at him. "Mercy County." He was still for a moment. "Trauma surgery?" "Yes." "What unit do you primarily work?" My sister laughed softly. "Daniel, you don't have to." "Bay 4?" he asked. I studied him. "Sometimes. Depends on the shift." He looked down at his plate and then back at me. "Were you working the night of November 14th? 2 years ago?" The room didn't register the question. My mother was reaching for more potatoes. My father was mid-chew. My sister was watching Daniel with mild confusion, turning her wine glass slowly by the stem. But I had gone completely still. November 14th. The I-90 pileup. 6 cars, 1 semi-truck, 4 critical transports in under 20 minutes. I had been 17 hours into a shift when they rolled through the doors. I remembered the radio chatter bleeding through the hallway, the charge nurse calling out bay assignments, the way the whole department recalibrated in under 60 seconds, the way it does when the situation requires it. I remembered the man in Bay 4 specifically, 26 years old, blunt abdominal trauma, internal bleeding, BP dropping fast, and a splenic laceration that required an immediate decision between observation and the OR. I took him to the OR. He was out of surgery in 90 minutes, stable by morning. I had never learned his name. I rarely do. They come in, we stabilize them, they go upstairs, and we go back to the bay for whoever comes next. I looked at Daniel carefully. I said. He exhaled through his nose. Slow and controlled, the way people breathe when they are managing something larger than the moment. "The young man in Bay 4, he said. 26, dark hair. He came in from the highway pileup. My sister said, "Daniel, what are you?" That was my brother. Nobody said anything. My sister stopped turning her wine glass. My father lowered his fork. My mother looked between Daniel and me with the expression of someone who has just realized the conversation went somewhere she wasn't tracking. Daniel's voice was even, but something underneath it was not. He was driving back from his girlfriend's place. He called me right after the accident, barely coherent, said he couldn't feel his legs. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already out of recovery. He paused. They told me the trauma attending had made a call in the OR that most people wouldn't have made as quickly. That the speed of the decision is what saved him. He looked at me directly. I spent 6 months trying to find out who it was. The administration couldn't release the name. I filed a formal commendation letter and never heard whether it went anywhere. I sat very still. "His name is Ethan," Daniel said. "He's 28 now. He's getting married in June." My mother made a soft sound. My sister's face had gone through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, recalibration, something that looked briefly like recognition, and then the familiar tightening around her mouth that I have always been able to read. She was losing the thread of the evening, and she knew it. "Daniel," she said, her voice carefully light. "That's a very sweet coincidence. But she was just doing her job. That's what emergency surgeons do. It's not like she made a splenic repair decision in under 4 minutes, Daniel said, quietly, without a clear CT read. On instinct and training and whatever she had in front of her at that moment. He didn't look at my sister when he said it. He looked at me. I've been in operating rooms for 20 years. I know what that call costs. I know what it means to make it. My father shifted in his chair. "Well," he said, in the tone he uses when he is about to minimize something. "Emergency medicine is one thing, but the level of complexity Daniel works at, with respect," Daniel said, and his voice was still even, but something underneath it had gone flat. The complexity I work at exists because people like your daughter kept the patient alive long enough to get to me. He set his fork down. The most elegant cardiac repair in the world doesn't matter if the trauma surgeon in the first hour makes the wrong call. I've seen it go both ways. The table was completely silent. My sister looked at me. I held her gaze without expression because I have been holding my gaze without expression at this table since I was 12 years old. So, my sister said finally, her voice slightly brittle now, I suppose we're all meant to celebrate that she stitched someone up a couple years ago. She saved my brother's life, Daniel said. And then she probably went back to her shift and didn't think about it again, because there was someone else in the next bay who needed the same thing. He picked up his fork again. That's not stitching someone up. That's what the rest of us depend on and rarely acknowledge, my mother said quietly. Let's just eat. But the meal had already changed shape. You could feel it. The configuration of the table was different. The balance of it rearranged by a few sentences the way furniture looks different once you realize where the light is actually coming from. My sister ate in silence for a while. My father tried twice to redirect the conversation, once about a neighbor's renovation, once about a football game that hadn't happened yet, and both times it landed in 3 inches of water and sank. Daniel was polite throughout. He asked my mother about the recipe. He complimented the table. He was the kind of man who knows how to occupy a room without taking it over, which is a skill I had not expected and did not know what to do with. Dessert was set out, but nobody reached for it with much enthusiasm. My sister excused herself to use the restroom. My father started collecting plates, which he does when he wants to avoid eye contact with a room. My mother disappeared into the kitchen. That left Daniel and me at the table. He looked at me without pretense. I'm sorry about tonight. You don't need to apologize for anything. Your family, he started, has always been like this. I finished. You didn't cause it. He was quiet for a moment. Ethan talks about that night sometimes. He doesn't know who specifically. He just says he woke up and a nurse told him the surgeon made a call that bought him enough time. He paused. He has a scar along his left side. He says he's proud of it. I didn't say anything. I had no memory of Ethan's face. I have no memory of most of their faces. That is not a hardship. It is just the nature of the work. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. I waited. How long have you been at Mercy County? 6 years. By choice? Yes. He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. Your sister described it as, I heard how she described it. Do you ever? He stopped. Started again. Does it bother you? The way it's framed by people who aren't in it? I thought about that honestly. It used to, I said. It doesn't anymore. I stopped needing the frame to match the picture. He looked at me for a long moment. My sister came back from the hallway, stopping when she saw us sitting there talking. Her expression shifted back into something managed and bright. Am I interrupting something? She asked. No, I said. I pushed back my chair. I should get going. I'm back on at 6. My mother came out of the kitchen with a dish towel and a look of faint distress. Already? You haven't had dessert. I know. I'm sorry. I kissed her cheek. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. My hospital badge caught the overhead light for a second. The blue lanyard with the white card and my name and my title below it in smaller font. I said goodnight to my father, who was still loading the dishwasher with unnecessary focus. My sister followed me to the front door. Well, she said, her arms crossed, her voice carrying that particular brightness that means she is holding something back. I hope you're satisfied. I looked at her. With what? You always do this. Her voice dropped lower, less for the room now, and more for me. Every time I have something good, every time I bring someone home, you find a way to make it about you. You couldn't just sit there and let me have this. I didn't say anything all night until he asked me a direct question. You didn't have to say anything. She looked at my badge. You just sat there in your scrubs with that, she gestured vaguely, that whole quiet martyrdom thing you do, like you're so above it all, so humble, so self-sacrificing. I stood at the door for a moment. The porch light was on outside, moths circling it in slow arcs. I came straight from a 31-hour shift, I said. I didn't have time to change. I was tired, and I came anyway because it mattered to you. I opened the door. I don't have a martyrdom thing. I just don't have the energy left to perform for you. I drove home, through empty streets, and got into the shower, still half asleep on my feet, and stood there until the water went cold. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel validated. I mostly felt the particular exhaustion that lives in your bones after a long stretch of work, heavier than muscle tiredness, deeper than sleeplessness. The kind that accumulates over years and never fully drains. I had not expected Daniel. I had not engineered any of it. Ethan was one patient among thousands I had cared for without knowing their names. And if I had passed Daniel on the street an hour earlier, I would not have recognized him. The connection between us was invisible until it wasn't. I fell asleep thinking about November 14th, the way you think about something you've nearly forgotten. Not with clarity, just with the sense of having been there and done what was necessary and moved forward. 2 days later, I was pulling a double when my charge nurse handed me a note. It was a card, actually. Printed header, professional stock, the kind medical offices keep for correspondence. It said he had called the hospital and asked them to pass it along if possible. He had not included a personal number. He had not overstepped. It said, I would like to formally complete what I started 2 years ago. I've been carrying an unfinished debt to whoever was in that operating room. Now that I know, I'd like to close it properly. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss a departmental equipment grant for Mercy County. No strings, no credit, just what should have been offered long ago, at the bottom. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about Sunday dinner. You deserved better from that table. I folded the card in half and put it in my jacket pocket and went back to the floor. My sister called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called again the next morning. The message she left was composed but tightly wound. She had spoken to Daniel, she said, and he was being distant, and she knew I had something to do with it. She could feel it, and she wanted me to stay out of her relationship. I texted back, I haven't contacted him. I hope you two work it out. She did not reply. A week passed, then 2. I heard through my mother, in that oblique way news travels through families, sideways, wrapped in a question that Daniel had asked for more time before setting a wedding date, that he was reconsidering some things. My mother said it in the same tone she uses to describe weather, as if it were happening to someone else entirely. She didn't ask me anything directly. I didn't offer anything. My sister posted something on social media. I didn't see it firsthand, but someone who follows us both sent me a screenshot. It was long, several paragraphs, and it described how a family member had undermined her relationship by exaggerating professional history to impress her fiancé. It implied manipulation. It implied rivalry. It was written with the emotional fluency my sister has always had for an audience. I read it once and set my phone down. I did not post anything. I did not respond. I did not text my sister or my mother or anyone in my family to explain myself, because I have spent enough years explaining myself to people who have already decided what they think. 3 days later, Daniel left a comment on her post. I found out about this the same way I found out about the post someone sent it to me. It was brief and it was public, and it was the kind of thing you cannot take back once you've written it. It said, I ended the engagement because I realized I had been watching your family treat someone with genuine grace as if she were a burden. That's not something I can marry into. I wish you well, but this isn't her fault. It never was. Her comments turned quickly. Not viciously, just the quiet, settling kind of disagreement that moves through a thread when the facts shift. People are not cruel when they don't have to be. They're just honest. My sister called me 7 times that day. I answered on the 7th. You talked to him, she said. Her voice was past the point of composure. I haven't spoken to him since Sunday dinner. Then why would he? Because he saw what he saw, I said. I didn't tell him anything he didn't already have eyes for. She was quiet for a moment, that stretched out long and uncomfortable. Then, I just don't understand what you want from me. What do you want? I sat with that question for a second, not because I needed to think about the answer, but because I wanted to be sure of it. Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you. I haven't for a long time. I heard her breath catch. That's not, she started. I came to dinner, I said. I was tired, and I came anyway. And I sat at that table while you compared me to your fiancé, in front of your fiancé. I didn't make a scene. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, and I drove home alone, and I got up and went to work the next morning, the same as I always do. I paused. There's nothing to want from someone who has already made their opinion of you very clear. She hung up. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage for about 10 minutes after that, not thinking about anything in particular, just existing in the quiet. I used to cry after conversations like that. Now I mostly just feel the space open up, the release of something that had been held too tight. I went back to work. The equipment grant went through 4 weeks later. A formal institutional donation processed through hospital administration, anonymized, except for the sponsoring practice name. New portable ultrasound units for the trauma bays, 3 automated cardiac monitoring stations, a refreshed supply allocation that the department had been requesting for 2 budget cycles and never received. My attending director sent a department-wide email thanking the donor. She did not know who I was to him. She just said it was an extraordinary gift that would directly impact patient outcomes, and she hoped the donor understood what it meant. I read the email twice and then deleted it from my inbox and went down to the floor. Daniel reached out once more, about 2 months after Sunday dinner. He sent a message through the hospital's professional contact system, brief and straightforward. He said he hoped things were less complicated for me now. He said Ethan wanted to meet me someday, if I was ever open to it, but there was no pressure and no expectation. He said he admired how I had handled everything, or more precisely, how I had declined to handle it at all. He said one thing that I have thought about since. The most remarkable thing about you that night wasn't the work history. It was that you sat at a table where you clearly weren't seen and you didn't flinch once. You just waited, like you already knew the room would sort itself out if you gave it enough time. I read that sentence a few times. I let it sit. He was not wrong. Somewhere in the last several years I had learned, not as a strategy, not as a technique, just as a fact that arrived quietly one morning and never left, that you cannot make people see you. You cannot explain your way to their respect. You cannot perform your credentials convincingly enough, or work hard enough in the right rooms, or arrange the facts in a way that finally lands. People who have decided what you are will hold that shape long past the evidence. What you can do is stay. Show up. Keep working. Let the record accumulate, even when no one is reading it. Let it accumulate not for the moment when it might be useful, but simply because it is true. And being true matters even when it goes unacknowledged. I had been at Mercy County for 6 years. In that time, I had treated over 11,000 patients. I had published 4 papers that nobody in my family had read. I had trained 14 residents, 3 of whom had gone on to programs I could not have gotten into on my own best day. I had worked nights and holidays and double shifts, and the kind of shifts that end with you sitting in your car in the parking garage, unable to remember if you turned off the equipment because your brain has finally hit a wall. None of that had ever come up at a Sunday dinner, and that was fine. It was always fine. That was never what the dinners were for. I moved apartments in the spring, smaller place, easier commute, a coffee shop on the corner that opens at 5:30 when I get off night shift. I started running in the mornings, when my schedule allowed. I called my mother every Sunday, briefly, the way you maintain something that no longer nourishes you but still belongs to you. She was always warm in the way she has always been warm, Surface temperature, consistent, not probing. My sister and I texted occasionally, politely, the way people text who have agreed, without words, to stop expecting something from each other that neither of them has. I don't know if that counts as healing. I think it might just count as settling, which is not the same thing, but is sometimes the best available option, and I am enough of a medical professional to know that best available option is worth accepting without shame. What I know is that on the nights I drive into the hospital at 2 a.m, the city's still dark and the building lit up from the inside the way buildings are when they never get to close, I feel something that is not quite peace, but is in the same family. The specific steadiness of a person who knows exactly what they are doing and why, without needing anyone in the adjacent room to agree. There is a particular kind of invisibility that comes with certain kinds of work. The work that happens in rooms that aren't photographed, in decisions that don't get framed or credited, in the space between when someone is dying and when they are not. Nobody outside that room sees what it cost. Nobody runs the credits. The patient goes upstairs. The surgeon goes back to the bay. And the world keeps turning without any record of what just changed. For a long time, I thought the invisibility was the problem. I thought if the right person could just see clearly enough, if the right conversation happened, if I could find the words to explain it, the weight would lift. The room would recognize me. The table would rearrange itself into something fair. But that's not how it works. The recognition doesn't come from outside. It never did. The dinner is just a dinner. The table is just a table. And the silence, the long, practiced, bone-deep silence I have perfected over 31 years, is not absence. It is not surrender. It is not the quiet of someone who has given up. It is the quiet of someone who no longer needs the room to echo back what she already knows. I am back on in 4 hours. I am going to sleep now, and when the shift starts, I will be ready.